security tokens is kind of a catch-all. Security tokens will be the majority of the tokens that are out there, with the exception of utility tokens that can really be proven that they're utility tokens, that are only marketed to users rather than investors, where the platform is ready, and you're essentially buying a license to a piece of software the way you would for Microsoft, right? True utility. The majority will be security. Under that umbrella, you'll have security tokens that are meant to be used as utility in the future, and then you'll have financial or investment tokens, and these are the tokenized securities space.
If you get into this space, if you start talking to people and you start learning from them, what you learn is that every single person is the smartest person you've ever met. And like, where you want, my business is all about investing in people. And like, where you want to be placing investments is really where the smartest people are playing.
So as someone who's worked at 2 different investment banks, I've seen how archaic those systems can be. In 2014, when I was building interest rate curves on derivatives desk, we were still using MS-DOS, believe it or not. That's how archaic it is, right? And if you've seen the financial crisis in 2008, you saw how complicated derivatives can be and how there's a lack of transparency, which gives way to fraud and mispricing and arbitrage. And trading securities and structuring securities through smart contracts and trading them on the blockchain can really eliminate a lot of those risks. So my hope is that in the next 10 years, most equity offerings, most debt offerings, most venture capital fundraising is done on the blockchain.
Hey, I'm Luke Kerner, and we're here at BTC Miami, which is one of the largest conferences in the United States. For today, this is definitely the center of the crypto universe, so it's great to be here. And also, Miami is an epic city in terms of the history of crypto, because the coming out party of Ethereum was here a few years back. And we're here tonight at Bagatelles, an awesome restaurant in South Beach, and we're throwing a meetup, and it's a security token meetup, so we're getting some experts on that space, and we're going to talk about security tokens, and I think we're going to have a pretty great time, so why don't you come in?
The more money into the space, the more fiat money that we're able to attract. That means there's going to be a complete flourishing of the entire blockchain space. So if we're able to attract real money, and I'm talking not necessarily retail investors, I'm talking about smart money and eventually institutional investors, endowments, if they could actually see the value of blockchain in and of itself, and we provide these security tokens as a vehicle to attract such large investors, I don't see a problem in them in the long run.
I think the first movement for security tokens will be these exempt offerings, as Joe was saying, like a 506C or a 506B. To accredited investors, those types of offerings require less documentary disclosure, but eventually, once the tools are in place, I think some IPOs with full-on documentary disclosure and financials, prospectuses, will eventually come to the blockchain as well, and we'll see these ICOs or STOs eventually become public offerings that may even take over the traditional IPO that we've been seen for a number of years.
The security token hype, it'll be interesting to see if it lives up to expectations. On the one hand, some public companies are talking about tokenizing their existing security offerings that are now stock, and something like that would just be a huge game changer. But on top of that, there's still a lot of companies that are trying to raise money for their cryptocurrency project, and if they want to be legitimate, at least in the United States, that means security tokens. So I think we will see a lot of projects this year.
The technology itself is going to create a disruptive revolution in how businesses get done, and there are going to be some very interesting businesses that emerge from the primordial ooze, just like eBay did from the internet, or Amazon.com. There are going to be some amazing businesses that ultimately succeed in what's going to be a Darwinian evolution.
I recently looked at a report put out by Goldman Sachs that suggested that stock markets can probably save about $6 billion a year leveraging blockchain technology. So these are really interesting data points, and we think that the uniqueness of the offering of blockchain technology will really have impact in a number of different verticals and industries over the coming 10 or 20 years.
So, George, what do you think about this? How does this land with you?
Yeah, I agree with Adam. I was very active in the EB5 industry back when, I was on panels arguing with people like, no, these are securities. And they're like, no, they've never been securities. What are you talking about? And it took a few years for the SEC to come out and start enforcing.
I think that you really have to look at what the rights and the privileges and the obligations that are inherent in the token are, how it's being sold, and what it's being marketed for, not the way that it is characterized. And I think you used the Swiss guidance as an example. The Swiss guidance, there's guidance from Gibraltar and also now from Singapore that are beginning to flesh out what should these tokens mean. So I think you really have to look at what is the token, what does it represent, not just what is it called.
Yeah, so I think that most people who talk about security tokens come at it from a crypto perspective. So what they're trying to figure out is how does the old world fit into this new world? And I question whether that's the right approach. So if you actually take the approach from traditional finance and say, what we're doing is issuing securities, why do we need a token to do that? And the answer is all of the financial transactions, so the investment, and then also the management of the cap table is done by the blockchain. And so when we talk about these security tokens, the token doesn't really matter, right? What the magic here is that the blockchain is helping to consummate a financial transaction in a more efficient and lower cost way. And then on top of that, we can manage all of the post-investment activities and governance via the blockchain.
Anil, you want to?
I was just going to say, here in Silicon Valley, to be sure, we are also counseling our clients to take any issuance as a security, consistent with where the SEC is, where the securities regulations are.
So liquidity is important as a secondary benefit in that you want to allow investors, once they've made an investment decision, to not be stuck forever, right? So usually with a private company, you don't really have an opportunity. Once you've made that investment, you're kind of in it for whatever the time horizon of that company is until they have some sort of exit event. Well, what tokens have allowed, because there is a transferability, I don't want to say necessarily a liquidity yet, and I don't want to say that all of these transactions being conducted in a legal way, but just technically there is a transferability amongst them because of the underlying technology. That has allowed this secondary market to develop and allow for people who made an initial investment to then resell those tokens either at a loss or a profit, depending on the performance of those tokens.
I had a chance to discuss the state of ICOs in the Southeast Asian market with Nix Nodello from the Philippines.
Nix is the chairman and CEO of Xerpes, Inc. Xerpes is the largest mobile consumer technology company in Southeast Asia. He's the 2015 Ernst & Young Philippine Entrepreneur of the Year, as well as an active angel investor in early-stage tech startups and blockchain company token sales. Let's have a listen at what he had to say.
Can you comment on any regulatory directions that are happening in countries in Southeast Asia?
For me, regulation is really inevitable anywhere in the world. My belief is the countries that properly regulate strike a fine balance between controls and innovation will really attract a ton of investment capital and potentially accelerate the economy that they're headquartered in because of the influx of crypto activity. I've spoken to a couple of regulators in my part of the world, and their perspective is that they know that over-regulation will simply drive people to the black market. However, too little regulation, and you have these uninformed investors that will not be protected. So it's really a fine balancing act.
Giuseppe Lopresti, thanks so much for joining us today, all the way from Shanghai.
Yeah, thank you, Adam, to giving me this opportunity to share our project with you and with your audience. I'm very glad to be here. We are doing what is nowadays called an STO, because it's a security token offering instead of initial coin offering. Why? We are doing an STO because we want to raise the money that we need in order to fully implement on a full scale our project. As I said, our project is not only a technological project, it's not just a technology showcase, but it's a complete business project that involves a lot of business development, that involves a lot of marketing activities, because of course, in order to people to understand the difference between the sharing economy 2.0 with the blockchain and the sharing economy that is already out there, they need to have a lot of exposure to the technology and to the platform itself.
It all started with kind of the prediction that the next megatrend in crypto will be assets migrating to the blockchain in the form of tokens. So real estate bonds, private equity, pretty much any security is better denominated as a token than it is as traditional forms of ownership like stocks, LP shares, units. This is the future, not share certificates and filing cabinets, and we're excited to be at the forefront of this movement.
I definitely think that security tokens are going to be a new trend going on, and it's a really interesting proposition, but it's also really hilarious because, you know, before no one wanted to be a security, they wanted to just be a utility token. Now it's everyone's going to probably want to be a security token, so it's a very different kind of shift.
I think it's hard to see right now for people who are not inside, but what I'm seeing from the inside is I'm seeing a massive wave of companies that want to tokenize, and with a good reason. You know, there's liquidity and there's all sorts of reasons to go into the securities on, you know, ownership on the blockchain. Makes a ton of sense. So what I'm predicting, if you will, is that in the next few months you'll start seeing more exchanges, or they're not exchanges exactly, trading platforms launching. Initially there's going to be more trading platforms than tokens. And then the tokens will start arriving, 20 tokens first, then about 100 tokens. And then the institutional investors are going to start putting money into tokens because they're going to be custodians, and we're already working with a custodian. Once custodians are in, the institutional investors will come in, and then we'll start to see an avalanche. And then what I call the big migration will start. The big migration is not about new companies issuing new tokens, it's about existing companies taking their existing assets and moving them to a token so they can be traded.